A unique piece of video footage of Victor Gille has recently become available on YouTube. And for pianists, this is not just a historical curiosity, it's a window into a musical world that has almost disappeared. Gille was especially famous for playing Chopin. Since childhood, he was surrounded by musicians who were close to Chopin's circle. He absorbed an improvisational way of playing that was still alive in that environment. People say he even often visited Chopin's grave in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris at dusk, hoping to feel closer to the composer's spirit and understand his works better. And today I want to show you what piano students can actually learn from this very, very unique footage. Let's begin with the poetry of piano playing. Many students have a very simplified idea of musical intensity. They think intensity mainly depends on where the melody goes. If the phrase rises, they automatically get louder. If it reaches a high note, they treat that note like the summit of the mountain. And very often I hear interpretations like, but now you see that it's actually not very natural, because leaning on the strong beat is kind of intuitive for many, but it's not very beautiful here. And also making crescendo to the top of the phrase, it might seem like an intuitive thing to do, but actually it doesn't sound really well, doesn't really sound in style. And what Gille does here, he demonstrates a beautiful example of a so-called bel canto technique, which relies not on those kind of intuitive cliches, but on a rather how a human voice works. So he starts each upbeat with a little bit more energy and actually softening the first beat. Then I really love his very, very quiet tempo. He doesn't really care whether you're going to be bored or not. He just enjoys this quietness and this peace. And then a very delicate, very transparent ending, which is not careless, not weak, but very, very elegant. And then again, more energy and a little bit more intensity on the leading tones. Because then music starts to breathe, and then it really blossoms like a flower. Today, many pianists lead everything towards the top note of the phrase, almost as if they are conquering Everest and hoping the audience will admire the achievement. But this is not necessarily the aesthetics of Chopin's time. And I'm not saying that modern pianists are wrong, because there are many, many brilliant modern interpretations, and I love many of them. And I'm a modern pianist, myself. But the point is, the aesthetics have changed enormously. Now look at how unpretentious Gille's approach is. He creates a flow towards the center of the phrase here. So you expect a climax, but then he plays actually softer the destination notes. And also I really like how he plays without the pedal and very, very crisply those passages. And then again, lighter. Yeah? So he creates this flow, but he doesn't make an achievement out of it. Because modern interpretations very often would go in a more straightforward way, for example. Climax of the phrase. And then the next phrase, obviously more. and then but you see that it sounds very massive, very straightforward. And that's why Gille's approach here, when he creates this flow, but he doesn't really make a big deal out of it. He doesn't try to achieve you anything. He just plays a nocturne, which is basically a salon piece. It's an unpretentious, small souvenir. It's not a ballade or a sonata. It's not something to achieve or conquer. Just something to enjoy. And this sounds really refreshing to me, because sometimes the most beautiful thing is not to insist, but to actually release and let it be. Now let's talk about something every performer needs: how to survive mistakes. There is a spot where Gille basically forgets the left hand. But notice how he gets out of it. He does not panic, he does not stop, he does not make a face. He simply plays the right hand, which he remembers, luckily, and something like it in the left hand. I bet that if you don't know the piece well, you could even not notice. And this is a crucial performance skill. You cannot always be perfect, no one can. But when you perform, your job is to stay with the flow of the music as much as possible. So if you perform a piece and if you forget the left hand, play the right hand. If you lose part of the texture, keep the part you can keep. If you forget everything, just improvise until you find the next section. The golden rule of piano playing: no matter what happens, no matter how big your memory lap or mistake, you never take your hands off the keyboard and you never stop playing. You play something, like whatever, just continue playing and continue fighting for finding the exit. But how you practice the specific skill of not getting stumbled or not getting stuck when you make a mistake and continue going? I would suggest you, every day when you practice, combine diligent work on smaller sections when you polish details with playing through larger sections, even when you have a very fresh piece, which you can't play very well, but still work diligently on a smaller section, on a smaller spot, and then go through the larger section in any tempo you can handle, with a simple goal to never stop. So no matter what happens, you just go on, and you learn to handle mistakes on the go and just skip something and jump to the next bar, to the next beat, if you can't play something precisely. This is a crucial skill, and which you have to really train, because many students get stuck in this mentality of, I just work on these two chords, and then I work on these two chords, and I work on this specific jump, and then they really lose this. They don't develop this ability to think long and go with the flow. There are also several fascinating technical details in this video which I want to discuss with you. First, notice how often he plays with a really low wrist, which is below the keys. And this kind of technique was much more common in earlier piano traditions, like 19th century. And together with very active, almost grasping fingertip, it gave the pianist an intimate contact with the key and a special crispiness. And in this fragment, you can see a good example of what was often called jeu perlé, pearly playing. And the notes are clear, delicate, and beautifully separated, like little pearls. But I have to add an important warning. On modern pianos, which are often heavier than pianos of that time, trying to imitate this exact low wrist approach can be actually risky, and some students may get wrist pain very quickly. So this is not something I would recommend copying literally. And even when I try to play like this, I can actually feel that, yeah, it's actually kind of cool to create this kind of crispy effect. And it's kind of like a little bit rough, a little bit kind of like sharp, and it might be cool if you want to create something crispy here. But I would say that you can get a similar effect by playing with a normal, like ergonomic wrist position at the key level, not below. So the result will be quite similar, but without health risks. So I would definitely not advise this. But at the same time, there's something really very, very valuable in his playing here, because look at how his arm is free and how active his fingertips. Even when he plays notes with a rather flat finger, you can still feel that he has a really great grasping contact with the key. And the arm beautifully shapes each motion. It's absolutely free. And there is a simple physical law here. If the part of the body that needs to work is underdeveloped, another part turns in as a compensation. So if your fingertips are not strong enough and not quick enough, then of course you will get a lot of tension in the other parts of the body elsewhere to compensate this weakness. That's why if the fingers are not active and strong enough, the wrist, elbow, and shoulder, or even neck. This is why I have created a comprehensive 20-hour technique course designed to help you improve your technique in a safe but efficient way. There is a time-limited discount available right now, so if you want structured help with this, check the link below. Now let's look at another detail, his trill, because this is very peculiar. So he uses fingers 1 and 2 and then slides toward the thumb. And this fingering gives him a very crisp trill, and he plays it without pedal actually. Another interesting point. But again, I would say that although the sound quality here is very peculiar and really crispy, this 10/5 finger, which he has, it's not actually most ergonomic way to play trills. You can play in a similar crispy way if you want, but without that tension in the 5th finger. And I really wonder whether Chopin himself would play trills like this, as he was a genius in piano technique efficiency. And this is another major difference between the tradition of that time and today's traditions, because today many pianists prefer to play Chopin's trills smoothly, often with a pedal, almost like a vocal vibrato. Oh. Like this, yeah? But this approach where Gille combines legato and this very crispy, dry trill is actually very interesting, very unique from the today's perspective. So in this case, the trill becomes a kind of spicy contrast against the overall legato character. Now, I have to say that not everything in Gille's playing is equally convincing for me. Because, for example, the middle section is personally, for me, the least impressive part of the performance, and many professional pianists today would reach greater freedom and flexibility here. And I think that one limiting factor here is, again, same low wrist that helped him so much in the lyrical passages before in the simpler sections. But here, when the texture is wider and you have more leaps, playing these things on the lower wrist is actually quite limiting. Like, for example, here, of course, you can play like that with wrists being really close to the keys. This is not the most difficult spot. But still, I would say that having a little bit more freedom in the arm and shaping your motions in the following way, when you would lean a little bit on that octave, and allow your hand to breathe slightly between the elements. This is, of course, exaggeration, yeah. Then, of course, you minimize those motions and you get something. Especially this spot is curious. So in this spot, he misses some bass notes because the horizontal movement which he uses here, it's not the most efficient here. When we have such wide leaps, a curved motions would be more ergonomic here. So for example, this kind of motion would be much more natural here. And later through the section, for example, here, you can see that he kind of finds this motion. and it immediately becomes more precise. But in the beginning of the section, he kind of fails to find this natural movement, staying kind of glued to the key level, moving horizontally, and that's why the precision suffers. That's why an important point here is that a technique that helps one passage, like for example, when you play this on a really low wrist, maybe it may help you to get a more intimate control over the keys. So one technique can be beneficial for a certain spot, but it doesn't mean that it will work for every spot. That's why a good pianist and musician must develop a great range of techniques. Finally, let's talk about rubato, because Gille's use of time is spectacular. His tempo is very free, almost improvisational, and it constantly changes according to how he reacts to the music in the moment. This is exceptionally good timing, because look how he creates the flow of the phrase toward the center, how he takes more time on the trill and returns us back calmly to the next phrase, only to linger on the upbeat. And the rolled chord is extended to create excitement and suspense before the next phrase. So this expectation is really graceful here, but he does not stretch it so much that the flow breaks. Also notice something very interesting. He does not react physically in the exaggerated way many pianists do today, and he's not trying to translate every musical event into a big visible gesture. He's not performing the emotion with his body. The timing itself carries all the expression. However, I have to say that if you play the bass note before the beat all the time, like he does, and if that happens every time, then it might be considered a bad taste from today's perspective. But overall, I have to say that this is very different from the modern concert hall approach, where everything often becomes larger, heavier, and more dramatic. Gille reminds us that Chopin can be intense without being massive. If you enjoyed this analysis, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments which historical or modern pianists you would like me to discuss next. Thanks for watching this and see you next time.